I'm really pleased to introduce today's presenters, Aidan Franco, Aaron Kimple, Katie Withmell, Anson Call, Claire Rapp, Evan Yerpa, and Patty Dappin, who won't present but will be in the background helping to answer questions. Aidan is the Communications Manager for the ReSHAPE program with the Southwest Ecological Restoration Institute, or SWERI. Aaron is the Program Director of SWERI's ReSHAPE program. Katie is a GIS specialist and data manager with the New Mexico Forest and Watershed Restoration Institute. Anson is a spatial analyst with the Colorado Forest Restoration Institute. Claire is the Connect program manager with the Colorado Forest Restoration Institute. Evan is the executive director of the Conservation Economics Institute. And Patty is the GIS program manager with the New Mexico Forest and Watershed Restoration Institute. We are so excited to have everyone join us today. And with that, I'll turn it over to Aidan.
Thank you for that introduction, Rachel. That was so nice. And I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. Okay. So today we're going to be presenting about the Southwest Ecological Restoration Institute's ReSHAPE program and our cornerstone tool, the Treatment and Wildfire Interagency Geodatabase. And I'm going to let our program director, Aaron, get us started.
Thank you, Aidan. And thank you all for being here this afternoon. Yes, we work for the Southwest Ecological Restoration Institutes. There are 3 congressionally designated sister institutes. Each are based out of universities within their respective states. So there's the Colorado Forest Restoration Institute out of Colorado State University, the New Mexico Forest and Watershed Restoration Institute out of Highlands University in New Mexico, and the Ecological Restoration Institute out of Northern Arizona University. These institutes really work as bridges between science and management, and they do that in several ways, but really they help co-develop and translate and apply actionable knowledge. And then they work collaboratively with forest and land managers and partners, and all in the name of progressing sound, socially responsible adaptive management around the realm of forest management, forest health, and wildfire risk management. And this is a scenario that we who are in the Southwest understand. Wildfires have become larger, more widespread, and certainly more pervasive. And then one of the key factors for helping to mitigate the impacts of wildfires are fuels treatments, thinning the prescribed fire, and applied in the right place, this can help reduce our wildfire risk. SWERI have a long history of working in this area, and definitely have a long history of trying to understand the application of fuels treatments, making sure we're doing the right work in the right place. And so it started largely, been working through this all along, but one of the big applications that we've had earlier in 2015 was the development of the New Mexico Vegetation Treatment Geodatabase by Highlands or the NMFWRI at Highlands. And then we've also done a lot of work around decision support tools and thinking about return on investment, and really have demonstrated and brought to light the value of applying data and making data accessible in decision making. So with that, understanding our work within our immediate region, SWERI were asked to do this and scale up their work to a national level. And so there was a request for SWERI to compile and display existing fuels treatment data and existing wildfire data. And then key to all this is to help facilitate and coordinate the use of this data in management applications. And then to publish a report around the work that we're doing every 5 years. And so this program is really built in 2 primary areas. One is the development of the Geodatabase itself, the Treatment and Wildfire Interagency Geodatabase, or TWIG, and then we have built several research programs around this. There's the social science aspect, or what we call CONNECT, understanding the biophysical effects of fuels treatment on wildfire behavior, the economics side of this, so the return on investment of the money that we put into fuels treatments, and then the data sciences. What does it take to bring forward disparate data sets, make them available, and make them accessible? And with that, I think I hand it over to Katie.
All right, Katie, I'm going to turn the screen over to you to talk about TWIG.
All right. One moment. Oops, where is it? All right, can you see it?
Not
Great,
quite,
so-
but it's coming online.
Okay. I'm not sure why that took so long. Okay, I'm going to give a brief demo of the TWIG viewer, which is available from our website, reshapewildfire.org. The link is in the upper right-hand corner where it says TWIG viewer. When you first see the TWIG viewer, there is a pop-up with a disclaimer that we are still in beta version and still under development. And there is also a link to a self-guided tour in the lower left-hand corner of that. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. A few things on the map. The map will center itself over your general location. So you can see I'm in Albuquerque, New Mexico. In the upper right-hand corner, there is a base map toggle, so you can get an air photo instead. The upper left-hand corner has zoom in and out buttons, as well as a dynamic legend, which will change depending on what you have on the map. The lower left-hand corner has a reset button. If you're doing a search or query, you can click that to come back to this basic screen. And then the lower right-hand corner has a feedback button, which will take you to a form. We would love all of your feedback after you've had a chance to explore the tool on your own. Over on the left-hand side, we have a number of tabs. The first one is the layer list. This is where the data in TWIG is located. The first is the TWIG treatment index and intersections layer. This is our database of federal fuels treatment data, which is currently a combination of the Forest Service FACTS database and DOI's NIFPORS database. We are also planning on integrating IFPERS, the new DOI system, in about 2 weeks. To get more information about this data, you can click on the options button here and click the view full layered details. This has all the metadata for the data set, as well as how we crosswalk the attribute and a link to the REST service. Back to that options button, we also have the option to look at the attribute table, to look at all of the different fields we have, and there's also an option to download the entire database here as a CSV, Geodatabase, GeoJSON, or shape file. And then the last option there is to update the layer transparency if you want to be able to see what is underneath those treatments. There are a couple of ways to symbolize this data. The default is years since treatment, but we also have options for treatment category and for treatment agency. We also have wildfire data. We have current or ongoing wildfires, recent wildfires, and historical wildfires. For any of those layers, you can again look at that layer details to get more information about that data set. We also have a number of layers that are on the map but are automatically turned off. Those include the fire reported points of origin, MTBS wildfire burn severity, as well as a number of different administrative boundaries. We also have the ability for the user to add basically any other layer that they would like to using this Add Layers button at the top. There's a few different ways. The first is to pick from our pick list of about 37 different layers that we think might be of interest to people, and find what you're looking for and then click the plus button. We also have options for the users to add a feature service or web service using the URL, or to upload their own layer, such as a shapefile or Google Earth file. Once those layers have been added, they will be at the bottom of the layer list, and you, again, will have those options that are available to look at the attribute table, or you can also click the trash can to remove them. Moving on to the next tab is the fuels treatment tab, where the user can search or filter our fuels treatment database. They can filter by funding source, by treatment types, by treatment name, by year, or by acres. Sorry, I can't type. There are also options to include planned treatments and to include treatments from facts common attributes. I am having a weird internet issue, of course. Okay, there we go. The results will show up here, usually much faster than that. And you can download them using this button here as a CSV, Geodatabase, GeoJSON, or shapefile. And then you can click into the treatment. And it will zoom, usually very fast, to the treatment. Let me turn off my camera and see if that helps the bandwidth situation. I am not sure why this is happening.
Katie, if you want to just keep going and talk through what would normally come up, I think that'll work for now.
Okay, I apologize, but yeah, so normally it will zoom to that treatment, give you all the full attributes for that treatment, and then also have a list of all of the treatments that intersect, or the wildfires that intersect that treatment, which are also downloadable. Let me clear out of here and see if I can, if I move on to the next tab, see if anything. I am not sure why this is happening. The wildfires tab is very similar, though. It is, I'm wondering, Patty, if your internet is better than mine and we might switch over.
Sure.
I apologize. My internet's been perfectly fine all day. Okay, let me just stop that share.
Here, give me just 1 minute here. I apologize for the delay.
Several folks in the chat are saying that it may just be an issue with the site right now, that they pulled it up on their own and it's lagging in general. So we might just have to talk through what would pop up without being able to show it today, and I do apologize for that.
Right, here, let me just share my screen.
Okay, I mean, and I don't mind going back to do it if you prefer, Patty, since.
Oh, it's fine. I'm just trying to find my, let's see. Okay, and so one thing that we did create was a demo for a presentation. Let me get into this. And so when you go to our website, this is a recorded demo. I think that since everyone's looking at the viewer, it's very slow, but I'll go through kind of some of the things that that Katie didn't get to. Again, it's going to go through how you can symbolize the different fuel treatments as well as the different options. You can add layers. Hold on. As well as how you can access the metadata. I apologize, this is kind of a repeat. But we're very proud of this database. This has taken a long time to develop. Crosswalking all of the systems of record has not been an easy task. And so we feel like we've helped created a value-added product so that you can look at all this federal data without having to make sense of all the codes and all of the abbreviations that may not be easily understood. So that's what we're excited about. The fuel treatments, again, we've compiled by funding source. So we've kind of collapsed some of these as well as treatment type and treatment name. You can search by wildfires. And in this case, we're going to look at the salt fire in New Mexico. And once you select the fire, it will, you can look at the treatments that intersect the fire, as well as you can click on individual treatments to find more information about the fire. Again, you can search by year or by incident type. Because the Congress helped, fund this tool, we have a special button for representatives. So you can get summaries by state or by congressional district. In this case, we're looking at New Mexico. So by selecting the congressional district, you can see summaries, statistical summaries, as well as you can look at the treatments or develop a report identifying the total wildfire, total treatments, and total funding since the year 2000. The area summary tool is awesome because you can have an area of interest that may not have a definite border. So if you're working in an area that you want to collect all the information from, you can digitize a polygon or drag a square. And then within a study area, you can get summary statistics of all the fuel treatment and wildfire information, as well as the number of structures that are within that district or area that you've defined. You can look at the treatments and download all that information, as well as if you wanted to look at an existing boundary, you can select some predefined boundaries. In this case, we're looking at the Carson National Forest. We're selecting a polygon within the Forest Service boundary. We're hitting apply to select and summarize all of this information. And again, you'll see the summary statistics as well as links to download the data. We are also working on other tools, such as wildfire progressions. We have print templates. You can share this information, as well as the feedback tool that Katie had mentioned. We'd love for folks to try out this tool and give us some feedback on how they like it or they don't like it, or they'd like to see something else. We'd love to get feedback. And with that, let me stop the sharing. And if, I don't know if Katie, if you have anything else to add, or if that's good.
No, that's great. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for pivoting to that demo, Patty. That was great. So one of the questions that we get most often about TWIG is how is it different from some of the other tools out there? And that's a very valid question. So some of the ways that we think TWIG is set apart from some of the other decision support tools is that we have incorporated the facts common attributes data along with the facts hazardous fuels data that most other tools also have. We also have burn severity data available right in the viewer, as well as this daily fire progression data that we've been collecting since 2024, which is in its prototype version. Also, the ability to both download all of the data and upload your own layers. TWIG is also both open access and open source. You don't need any sort of login to get access to TWIG. We also have a data paper coming out soon with more information on how our data has been put together and is really unique. One of the other things that really sets this program apart, we think, is the way that our research informs TWIG and TWIG informs the research. So like we said earlier, we have these different program areas that we're going to get a little bit more into. And each of these has helped inform the development of the tool. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Anson to talk about the biophysical effects side of our research program.
Hi, everyone. So as Aidan explained, an important part of the ReSHAPE program is to evaluate the effects of these land management activities on wildfire outcomes like burn severity and fire size. And so we have begun to do that with a couple of case studies of specific fires and landscapes where there were lots of forest management treatments that intersected with subsequent wildfires. So one of those places that may be familiar to some of this audience is the Kaibab Plateau. In 2020, the Mangum fire burned through a large area in that plateau north of the Grand Canyon in northern Arizona. And that fire intersected with a lot of prescribed burns and thinning treatments in that same area. And so we've done some preliminary modeling to assess the effect of treatments on burn severity in this case. And from our preliminary results, it does seem that wildfires are indeed, the severity of the wildfire can be reduced by both thinning and prescribed burning treatments that have occurred prior to that wildfire. So these figures show a little bit of that effect. On the left side here, we're looking at 3 different types of treatments and their effect on the burn severity of the subsequent wildfire. The black shape there, that represents a combination treatment of mechanical thinning and prescribed fire. The purple is just like a prescribed fire only treatment, and then the yellow color is like a mechanical thinning only treatment. All 3 of those different treatment types seem to have an effect on the subsequent burn severity of the fire, with that combined treatment having the strongest effect. So that's why if you look at the x-axis on the left plot there, that's the black curve is centered on the most negative value, indicating that it had the greatest reduction in burn severity in those treated landscapes where the treatment was both fire and mechanical thinning. The figure on the right shows how those effects of the treatments on burn severity decay over time. So the older the treatment is, the less effective we might expect it to be, as sort of the forests and the fuels regrow and fill back in after treatments occur. So that figure on the right just shows an estimate of how fast the effect of the treatment is decaying over time. So yeah, that's just like a quick summary of sort of the preliminary modeling we've done on this landscape. And there's also another case study that we're working on. This one is from the Hermit's Peak Calf Canyon fire area. This is another landscape that might be familiar to a lot of people in here. And all of this work is done by my colleague in New Mexico, Nate Tomczak, who's not here today, but he's done some excellent work on this. So he's doing something similar where he's using TWIG data on treatment locations and treatment types, treatment ages, to assess the effect of these treatments on burn severity as well, with some different types of models. And surprise, it sounds like he's finding sort of a similar outcome where burn severity is reduced, in fact, by the treatments that are occurring on that landscape, or that had occurred previous to that Hermit's Peak Calf Canyon fire. So we're accumulating some evidence that these treatments are indeed effective at reducing burn severity, and we're continuing to expand these models to be more nuanced, consider more confounding factors, and also we're focused on more than just burn severity, but other metrics like the speed of the fire spread or the ultimate fire size. We're interested in the effects of treatments on those outcomes as well. Awesome.
Thank you, Anson. And now I'm going to hand it over to Claire to talk about our social science research program.
Yeah, thanks, Aiden. So the social science research program also has this like feedback loop orientation where we have the TWIG viewer as a decision support tool, and we're interested both in improving the TWIG tool and understanding how people use it, but then also leading back to some broader questions about decision support tools more broadly. So the social science part of ReSHAPE, the Connect branch, is really interested in some fundamental questions. Who is using which decision support tools and in what way? And how do decision support tools influence decision making? I don't want to get into detail about all of the different research projects that we have, but I want to just quickly highlight 3 examples of how we can approach these questions and how Connect is approaching these questions. So when it comes to improving decision support tools and working with the TWIG, we have perhaps the most obvious project to open with, which is evaluating the TWIG tool with potential user groups. We're interested in how people are using decision support tools and in what way. And we start with the TWIG viewer. We bring it to potential users. We ask them how they're using it, how to improve that. And we get that feedback back into the TWIG viewer. The TWIG viewer has been on quite a journey with iterations and changes. And some of those changes have been the direct result of feedback that we've gotten from potential users. But we're not just looking at the TWIG tool, we're also looking at decision support tools more broadly. And we can use content analysis, document analysis, to look at what tools people have used in a variety of contexts. In this case, one example is community wildfire protection plans. We're interested in what tools are being used at that community scale wildfire risk reduction and how are people using them. We can look to documents to get a full census of those and start categorizing them and understanding things like scale and the presence of consultants and how that influences what information people have access to and what information they seek out. However, there's another way to look at that as well. So if that project is community wildfire protection plans and content analysis, we can also talk to collaboratives directly, ask them what tools did you use in a collaborative adaptive management cycle and how did they influence your decision making? How did you arrive at those tools? What did you learn from them? What were the barriers or facilitators to using them? This gives us a more holistic view than focusing on just one particular tool. Of course, it's always a depth versus breadth trade-off. And for this research project, we're looking at place-based collaboratives, walking them through in this focus group setting of these different stages of the collaborative adaptive management process. Where were tools most helpful? Where were they less helpful? Data collection for that one is ongoing, and we hope to be able to understand not only where there are gaps in where people could potentially use more help, more structuring, more information, but also we're aware of the potential for quite the opposite. Where do people have an abundance of tools and it becomes less solving an information gap and more helping people navigate what can at times be a really complicated information environment? So it's a really quick crash course of just some of the ways that Connect is looking at these broader questions of getting decision support tools to the right users at the right time, in the right way, for the right tasks.
Thanks, Claire. Evan is going to talk about our last program area, the economics.
Thanks, Aiden. One of the, perhaps maybe the greatest goal of fuel treatments is to lessen the wildfire damages and costs from these severe catastrophic wildfires. So economics is extremely important part of the evaluation and the research associated with fuel treatments. And we started our economics research looking at some of the kind of an overview of the benefits and costs of fuel treatments and forest restoration. We started that work with ERI, specifically at NAU. And you can see some of the figure on the right there kind of categorizes the main 2 large components of fuel treatment benefits. And when fuel treatments are conducted, there are initial changes in ecosystem services that happen, some immediately and some very quickly afterwards. And you can see some of the categories there on the right. This includes the option for woody biomass utilization. It includes oftentimes increased water yields. lower in the drainages. And then it also includes changes, usually positive, to use and non-use values. And there are also property value changes associated with fuel treatments. The perhaps even larger and bigger component of the benefits of fuel treatments are avoided wildfire costs. These costs are very complex to measure, and there hasn't been a whole lot of documentation of avoided wildfire costs, and that's because it requires a lot of complex simulation and modeling, and there's not quite enough fuel treatments at a landscape level yet to do a lot of evidence-based research looking back on some of the kind of the biophysical effects that you saw earlier. So there's starting to be more of that, but that's helpful. The avoided wildfire costs, we've kind of categorized these into 4 major categories, and that includes reduced suppression costs or response costs, includes the built infrastructure. So that's commercial properties, residential properties, and there's lots of infrastructure that can be affected by wildfires. And then we have, of course, human health concerns. This includes fatalities and injuries to the public, to firefighters. It includes air quality effects from smoke, and then well-being effects. And then there's a broad category of ecosystem services. There's a number of these that can be changed based on whether or not these wildfires encounter fuel treatments that have been in place before. So we started looking at some of this return on investments of these fuel treatments. And then we convened last fall, we convened a workshop of economic experts from academia, from the federal agencies, on sort of the best practices in terms of the methodologies for measuring and assessing the benefits and costs and the economic efficiency of fuel treatments. That was very successful. We learned a lot about the mathematics, but also the appropriate economic theory and how to incorporate and accord to appropriate economic theories for looking at cost benefits of fuel treatments. So we currently have a paper in review summarizing these methodologies. I'm excited for that. What we're doing now is we are in the midst of a couple of different research projects. One major finding that we had at our workshop was that this area of avoided wildfire costs, what we found was that there's still not a really good, we don't have a really good grasp on wildfire costs themselves. So in order to estimate avoided wildfire costs, we need to get a better understanding of all the wildfire costs. Typically, what you have is you have response and suppression costs that are reported. And then in the high profile fires where you have fatalities, where you have a number of burned structures, those are oftentimes reported. But there's numerous other wildfire costs and damages that are not documented, and that are really kind of this unknown area, and they're currently treated in a lot of economic analysis as zeros in terms of value, but we know that there's a lot of damage there. So we're really digging into understanding wildfire damages much better. And then after some of that research, we're going to launch into a final economics research program looking at a landscape level return on investment of fuel treatments. We will be using our findings from the wildfire damage and cost assessments to be able to better synthesize and estimate the avoided and potential avoided wildfire costs of damages. So that's in the hopper probably for next year, is to do a specific landscape on this. All this economics research it's a pretty open and new area of research, and we're really excited to be working on this. And we think we'll be adding a whole lot of value to the overall program. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Evan. And the last thing that we wanted to talk about today in this presentation is how we can work with all of you. So we have worked on building the treatment and wildfire interagency geodatabase and are still working on iteratively developing TWIG. And we're building out these research programs, but we want to know how can we work together with everyone here and bring this data to the right people. And so we are working on a suite of workshops that we would love to tailor to different interests and different groups in terms of data analysis, decision-making, just how to use TWIG, things like that, as well as research collaboration. Obviously, we have a good amount of research going on, but we would also love to be involved in other areas and really work together to make sure that, you know, we aren't double dipping, we're all working together to get the most out of this data. And we want to hear from all of you as well as to what other ideas there are for collaboration around this enormous amount of data that we have access to. So that is everything that we have for you today. And I think Rachel is going to facilitate our question session.
Alrighty, thank you so much for an excellent presentation all and for working through some technical issues. Our first question comes from Tim, and I believe it's to do with the economics portion. Wondering, what are the timescales for ROI and previous fire effects?
Well, Tim, that's a real broad question. That's one of the really difficult parts about modeling and estimating avoided wildfire costs, is because the changes in ecosystem services from fuel treatments and from wildfires are spatially and temporally dispersed. We have to consider how long fuel treatments are effective for and their decay rates, something Anson talked about earlier. What has typically been done in the limited amount of literature thus far on it is looking at the return of costs and benefits out into the future. So you would conduct a net present valuation where you enter in which years you would expect the benefits and which years you would expect the costs. And economists can bring that all together using rates of return to come up with what's called a net present value. And that's kind of the short answer on these timescales, but it's a very tricky issue. The spatial and temporal dispersion is very difficult.
All right, and go ahead and stay on, Evan, because we have one more question for you. Dessa was wondering, what is the potential for predicting ROI in fuel treatments in the Southeast, given the scale and frequency of events is significantly different from the Southwest?
Yeah, another great question. Right now, we are tackling much of this looking at the lower 48 primarily. So we know that there are very different fire regimes and different types of fuel treatments and different population adjacency in the East and the West. And the meta-analysis we were talking about earlier was just focused on Western, lower 48 Western wildfire. We are going to incorporate Eastern fires and fuel treatments because there's a rich history of fuel treatments there. And wildfires are increasing both in the East and the West and increasing in severity as well. So what will be done in our research is broadly, we'll probably have to use some dummy variable analysis to basically hone in on major regions, East versus West. And then we can also look at states as regions and all of that. But we are going to try to tease out that understanding up front that they're naturally going to be quite different in the Eastern US.
All right, thank you so much, Evan. This next question comes from Casey asking, was there any additional work to validate reported treatment polygons, such as addressing situations where only part of a polygon or unit was actually treated?
I can answer that question if that's all right. So nothing has been done yet as far as validating the data in the TWIG viewer with external sources, although we are actively working on that. So we've developed a collaboration with Chris Hackenberg, was at NAU and has now moved on to a UC school. But we'll be working with him to use JEDI data, which is a spaceborne LiDAR instrument, to estimate directly the changes in fuel as a result of treatment. And so that would give us a way to sort of independently sort of validate not only the spatial boundaries of the treatment, but also the strength of the treatment, or the degree to which treatments affected the vegetation and fuel load. So that's something we're super interested in and actively working on. We don't have any external validation product at this point.
Okay, thank you so much, Anson. And while you're on, I have one more question that you're probably the right person to answer. Gregor was wondering, are the fire and treatment data focused on Forest Service lands, or does it include other public lands, such as state and other federal agencies?
That's a good question. So if you look at the viewer right now, you'll mostly see Forest Service lands because most of the fuels treatments are done on forests, and those happen to be Forest Service lands. We also have data from all of the DOI agencies from NIFPORs, and soon we'll have data, the most recent data from all of the DOI agencies through their new database, IFPERS. And we are also adding state and other non-federal data in the near future through a partnership with the National Association of State Foresters. And yeah, so we are expanding beyond just Forest Service lands. It's the short answer to the question, and more of that data is coming online as the work progresses.
Okay, fantastic. And we got another comment from Tim just saying that private lands should be included. So good thing to keep in mind. Okay, we had a question from Sarah wondering if these types of tools could be adapted to areas outside of the lower 48, such as Hawaii.
This is a national program, and it's absolutely designed to incorporate data from, the work that's done in Hawaii and other places. So yes, it can be adapted. I think one of the things that we all recognize is that and not too dissimilar from Evan's response, is that we have an expertise in the forests that we work in day to day. And so there's a familiarity that folks in Hawaii would know, about their forest management, that we just don't have that knowledge. So one of the true strengths of TWIG is that we really wanted to be able to telescope national data down to the local level so that folks could localize that. And we're happy to help facilitate that and have conversations around how that could happen. That's part of the facilitation and application component of our work. And so happy to discuss those possibilities more.
Okay, and Tim just wanted to double check, are territorial lands included globally?
Yes. So if you're talking about U.S. territories like Guam or Puerto Rico, the answer is yes. We don't have any data from Native American reservations, as far as I know at this point. But the national data set does include all of the U.S. territories.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much. So Jessica had a couple of questions. The first is, have you received any feedback from users regarding difficulties with downloading treatment data, especially large amounts of data? And for people who may have encountered issues with this, is there a preferable browser to try and download data in, or any other workarounds?
I can answer that one as well. I myself have experienced difficulty downloading large data sets through the viewer. So that's just a thing that happens when you are querying a feature service like that. If you want to just download the data set in the entirety, there is a link to do that on the ReSHAPE website. If you just go to I don't know, maybe we could have someone pull it up, but it's
the TWIG data resources tab. It's under resources.
Thank you, Aiden. That's where you would where you should go if you just want to download the whole data set as a file geodatabase, and that's probably the best way to do it if you're looking for a large geographic area and a large range of time. Was there another part to that question? I think there was.
Wondering, how do you handle and differentiate treatment polygons that may comprise the exact same spatial area, but have multiple treatment categories or types over their lifetime?
That is a good question. So if there are multiple overlapping treatments, and it's like treatments of different types, like prescribed burn followed by a mechanical thinning treatment, those are different polygons, different overlapping polygons in the database. So each activity or each type of activity, whether it's thinning, prescribed burning, is a separate record in the database. And those spatial records can overlap or they can even coincide perfectly, but they'll be recorded separately. So yeah, that is one nuance to be aware of. If you're looking to see the full history of treatment data for a particular point on the landscape, you need to consider the full date range of the available data, and then you can sort of see the history of treatments as they build up over time at a certain point on the landscape. Does that answer your question? I hope.
Yeah, and Jessica, if you have any follow-up, just go ahead and pop it in the chat. Alrighty, Catherine was wondering, how often will the layers in TWIG be updated? Also, how often are new treatments or wildfire perimeters added?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the TWIG database is updated weekly by querying all of the source databases. The source databases are not always updated weekly. I think, for example, the Forest Service, their FACS databases, I think their updates are published bi-weekly. So we do try to make sure that we're refreshing the database to keep the data as current as possible. Wildfire perimeters, I don't recall how frequently we're querying the perimeter data, but I think it might even be more frequent than weekly. So we can build those. We didn't get into this when we did the TWIG demo, but there is a forthcoming feature where we should be able to visualize fire progression intervals as the fire grows in size over time. So we are capturing that data as those fire perimeters are added to the source databases.
Katie, do you know off the top of your head how often the wildfire data is?
I do not. I think that the recent and historical layers are probably only once a week because they wouldn't be updated very often, but I think the current wildfires is probably more often, but I could find that out.
And the feature that Anson is presenting is the daily progressions. And so this is a component of TWIG that we're in development on, where we do capture the growth of a fire in any, over a series of days with a daily progression, and we're really refining that tool.
Okay, fantastic. And I apologize if you guys answered this question earlier in the presentation, but just wondering, I know you said you pull most of your data off of federal and specifically Forest Service lands. Could non-federal partners, maybe partners who are part of a landscape collaborative, submit data on their ongoing treatments to be included in the database?
I think Aaron might have more to say on this, but I would say that there are partners that we're working with to collect data from, like the National Association of State Foresters. They have a more developed pathway to accept data from a variety of users. So if you are managing a nonprofit that has treatment data, if you're a private landowner that has treatment data, I think the National Association of State Foresters, their grant accomplishment reporting portal might be the best way to get data into TWIG. So by going through NASF and uploading that data that way. We're also aware that Landfire collects that same type of data as well. So the Landfire Public Events database captures that sort of data. So if you're putting your data there, it will make its way back to us.
I think you got it, Anson. I do think, for some of you, your states are submitting their data to the National Association of State Foresters. So if you're contributing to your state data sets, that will help it get into the NASF. And as Anson says, then we will pull from that database. There is a tool within TWIG where you can make associations between priorities that you set on your landscape. So your local priorities, your interests, We don't store that information. It's there for a temporary relationship, so that you can make associations between the federal data we have and your local decision-making process.
That tool is the add layers button that Katie showed.
Okay, fantastic. And I just have one last question that, again, I apologize if this has already been answered, but wondering if you can upload a polygon of interest, such as a CFLRP project boundary, to the TWIG tool to see all layers within that polygon, or if you would need to redraw the polygon on the map as you go.
So we do have a curated list of different boundaries that you can select from. CFLRPs are included in that. And so are other national boundary designations and efforts, even potential operational delineations. So pods, you can find pod layers in there, or watershed boundaries. But like I said, if you have local priorities that you've drawn out with your collaborative group, you have them stored somewhere, you can bring them into TWIG temporarily and make those associations.
Okay, fantastic. And just a last call for anyone online to go ahead and pop your questions in the chat if you have any for the presenters. I do have one last question for Claire, wondering if there are any preliminary results from the support tool use social science that is ongoing.
Yeah, I can share some preliminary results. For the TWIG evaluation, as I described, we did get incredibly helpful feedback from a variety of people about potential uses for TWIG, and that did help our team consider features both to add and just the ways to make things more user-friendly and more accessible for users just in general. For our community wildfire protection plan project, I can share that we did find that scale and the presence of consultants does have a really big influence on what decision support tools people use and what kinds they use. There's a bunch out there. Some are fire behavior, some are fuel treatment, some are climate tools. And I want to mostly just mention that we are aware of, and in the products that we're creating, we are trying to communicate the nuance of the mere presence of decision support tools does not improve the quality of a product or a plan, which is to say, like, tools can provide you helpful information, but that doesn't mean that personal experience, expertise, place-based knowledge doesn't also play a role. So with the community wildfire protection plans, we're really trying to tell this story about making sure that the differences that we observe in the number of tools that people use and the kinds of tools that people use is a manifestation of people taking a variety of equally valid paths to get to the same destination, and that these differences are not the result of structural or systemic barriers. That's just sort of one example of the kinds of things that we're looking at.
Okay, thank you so much, Claire. And one final question from Tim, wondering, are watershed boundaries FEMA defined or management boundaries?
Our watershed boundaries are pulled from the USGS. So I do not believe they're FEMA defined. Katie, correct me if I'm wrong,
I think
though.
they're just the hydrologic boundaries. I also wanted to add that I looked at the fire data and it is refreshed every 5 minutes.
Awesome. Thanks for double checking that. And Patty, thank you so much for putting all these links in the chat as we go. All right, so with that, we're wrapping up just a few minutes early. I want to really thank everyone for joining us online today. And thank you so much to all of our presenters for coming on and sharing your expertise. Thank you so much for telling us about this tool. I'm really excited to see where it goes and how it's used. And we look forward to hosting you again in the future. Take care and be well.
Thank you all. Thank you, Rachel.